The letter was 3 pages long, and it had been written and rewritten so many times that the final version, the one that actually got mailed, still had the ghost of previous versions visible in it. Places where a sentence had been crossed out and replaced. Places where the handwriting changed tempo as though the writer had stopped and started again after a pause. It was the letter of someone who was not accustomed to asking for things, and who had spent a long time trying to find the right words for a request that felt in every version he attempted either too small for what he actually needed or too large for what he had any right to ask for. He mailed it anyway. He was 17 years old. His name was Marcus Webb. He was from Lakewood, New Jersey, and he had been playing guitar since he was 9 years old, and his father had been gone since he was 4. And none of these facts existed in separate compartments in the way that facts sometimes pretend to exist in separate compartments. They were connected. The playing and the leaving and the age at which the leaving happened, and the instrument and the music and the specific music that the instrument had been playing for as long as Marcus could remember. All of it was connected in the way that the important things in a person's life are always connected, beneath the surface categories that adults use to organize experience into manageable units. His mother, a woman named Patricia Webb, who worked 2 jobs to keep the apartment on Clifton Avenue, and who had been doing this for 13 years without complaint that her son could hear, had raised Marcus with the specific combination of toughness and tenderness that single mothers in tight circumstances develop as a survival strategy, and that Marcus had absorbed as his primary model for how to be a person in the world. She was practical. She did not romanticize difficulty. She did not tell Marcus that his father's absence was a gift or an opportunity or any of the other things that people sometimes say to children who have been left, because she understood that those things are not true, and that children know they are not true, and that saying them anyway is a form of condescension dressed as comfort. She told him the truth, which was that his father had left, and that it was not Marcus's fault, and that they were going to be fine, and that fine was not the same as easy, but it was achievable, and they were going to achieve it together. They had achieved it. Marcus was 17 and doing well in school and playing guitar with a seriousness that his teachers described, in the parent-teacher conferences his mother attended alone, as the seriousness of someone who has found the thing that is going to organize their life. He played in the school jazz band. He played at church. He played in his room for 3 hours every night after homework, working through material that was increasingly beyond what could be described as beginner or even intermediate, working through it with the systematic patience of someone who understands that mastery is not a destination, but a direction, and that the direction requires sustained daily commitment over years, rather than the intermittent application of talent. He played Springsteen. Not only Springsteen, his influences were broad, and his ear was Catholic, and he had absorbed everything from Delta blues to jazz standards to the rock canon, with the omnivorous attention of a young musician trying to understand what the guitar was capable of. But Springsteen occupied a specific place in the music that Marcus played that was different from the place occupied by other influences. It was not simply that he admired the songs or the playing, though both of those things were true. It was that the music spoke to something in his specific situation in a way that music is not always able to speak to specific situations. That the songs about working people and fathers who were difficult or absent, and the particular grief of loving a place that doesn't offer you enough, and the question of whether to stay or go, and what staying and going each cost, that these songs had found Marcus in a way that felt personal rather than general, addressed rather than broadcast. He had written the letter because of a conversation he overheard at a show. He had gone to see Springsteen at the Prudential Center in Newark in November, an early Christmas gift from his mother, who had saved for 3 months to afford the ticket, and who had not told him this until after the show, because she did not want him to feel the weight of the saving during the experience of the music. He had stood in the general admission floor and heard things that he had been listening to on recordings for years, with a completely different quality of attention that live music demands and produces. And something about the experience had reorganized something in him in the way that music reorganizes things when it reaches the right person at the right moment. On the train home, he sat next to two men who were about his mother's age and who had been going to Springsteen shows for 30 years and who were talking about him in the specific, informed way of people who have been paying close attention to an artist across a long span of time. One of them said that Springsteen had always paid attention to the musicians around him, particularly to young musicians, particularly in New Jersey, particularly to the ones who were serious and who were working rather than waiting. He said Springsteen had been known to respond to letters, not always, not reliably, not in the form of any formal program or organized outreach, but personally, in the specific way of a man who understood something about what it meant to be a young musician in New Jersey, without enough resources, and with everything riding on whether the music was going to work out. Marcus spent 2 weeks writing the letter. He wrote about the music, which was the easiest part. He wrote about his situation, which was harder. He wrote about his father, which was the hardest, because writing about his father required him to find language for something that had never fully had language. The specific texture of a 13-year absence, the way it showed up in unexpected places, the way certain songs reached him differently because of it. He wrote that he was not asking for sympathy. He wrote that he was asking for something more useful than sympathy, which was the opportunity to learn, the opportunity to be in proximity to the work at whatever level was accessible to him, the opportunity to find out whether the thing he believed out his own playing was accurate or whether he was wrong in the way that young musicians sometimes are wrong about themselves, inflating the significance of what they have without the external calibration that comes from being in rooms with people who have been doing this longer. He mailed it to the management address he found online. He told no one he had sent it, not even his mother, because telling someone you have mailed a letter to Bruce Springsteen is the kind of thing that requires an explanation, and the explanation requires a level of vulnerability that Marcus, at 17, was not prepared to extend to anyone who would then have to manage their response while he was watching. He waited 6 weeks. He had almost stopped expecting anything, had moved the waiting from the front of his attention to somewhere behind his daily life. The way you move an unanswered question when the not answering has gone on long enough that continuing to actively wait becomes a form of self-harm. When his mother called him into the kitchen on a Saturday morning in January and handed him an envelope. It was a plain white envelope. His name was on the front in handwriting that was not a form letter font. He stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the return address and looked at his mother and looked at the envelope. His mother said, "Open it." It was not a long letter. It was 2 paragraphs written on plain paper, not letterhead, not the formal stationery of a management office or a public relations department. It was a letter from a person to a person, which is the only kind of letter that is worth anything. The first paragraph acknowledged Marcus's letter and said that it had been read. It said, in the specific language of someone who means what they are saying, that the things Marcus had written about his experience with the music had been honest, and that honesty in this context was worth more than a compliment. The second paragraph said that there was a position available with the touring organization, not a playing position, not yet, not at 17 without the specific kind of experience that the role required, but a position on the crew, a role in the production side of things that would put Marcus inside the operation of a major touring show for the duration of a run of dates. That would give him access to the musicians and the music and the daily reality of what it meant to build a career in music at the highest level. And that would pay him enough to cover his expenses during the period. It said that if he was interested, someone would be in touch with his mother, Marcus read it twice. He set it down on the counter. He picked it up and read it again. He set it down. His mother, who had been watching him read, said, "Well?" He told her what it said. She was quiet for a moment in the specific way that mothers are quiet when they have received news that is too large for the immediate response. Then she asked to read it herself. He handed it to her. She read it, she set it down, she picked it up and read it again. She said, "You wrote him a letter." He said yes. She said, "You didn't tell me." He said he hadn't told anyone. She was quiet again. Then she said something that Marcus has repeated in every interview he has given since, and that he says he hears differently each time he repeats it, depending on where he is in his own life when the repeating happens. She said, "Your father never asked for anything. I want you to remember that, and I want you to remember that you did." The production position was with the E Street Band's operation for a run of shows in the late winter of that year. Marcus traveled with the crew, did the work that the crew did, and was in proximity to the music and the musicians for 6 weeks. In the way that you are in proximity to things when you are part of the infrastructure that makes those things possible. He loaded equipment and watched sound checks and sat at the back of empty arenas in the afternoon while the band rehearsed and listened with the quality of attention that only someone who has come to music from a specific interior necessity can bring to the experience of watching it being made from the inside. He met Springsteen twice during those 6 weeks, not formally, not in any arranged way. Once in the hallway of a venue before a show, where Springsteen stopped and asked how it was going and listened to the answer with the specific quality of attention that Marcus recognized from the music. The quality of someone who has asked because they want to know and not because the question is the polite thing to ask. Marcus said it was going well. He said he was learning things he had not known how to learn from the outside. Springsteen nodded. He said that was the only way to learn certain things. He said the classroom and the room are not the same room. He said good luck and moved on. The second time was on the last night of the run, in the parking lot after the final show, where Marcus was helping with the loadout. Springsteen came through the parking lot on his way to the vehicle that would take him to the hotel, which was not unusual. He often walked through the crew loadout after shows, a habit that the crew understood as an expression of respect for the work they did. The acknowledgement that the show did not end when the audience left, but continued in the infrastructure of moving everything to the next place. He stopped when he saw Marcus. He said, "Last night." Marcus said, "Yes, sir." Springsteen said, "What did you learn?" Marcus thought about it. Not a quick answer, not a polite one. He said, "I learned that the music sounds different from inside than it sounds from outside. Not better or worse. Different. Like the difference between reading a book and being in the room where it was written." Springsteen looked at him for a moment. He said, "That's the right thing to have learned." He said one more thing. He said it in the way he says things that matter, without preparation, without the rhetorical framing of a person who knows they are being listened to and is arranging their words accordingly. He said, "You wrote me a letter. You asked for something. A lot of people your age don't know how to do that yet. Keep doing it. Not just with me, with everything. The asking is the beginning of the thing." He walked to the vehicle and got in and left. Marcus Webb graduated from high school in June of that year. He did not stop playing guitar. He enrolled in a music program, not the most prestigious one available to him, not the one that would have looked best on a resume, but the one that was going to teach him the specific things he needed to learn next, which was a distinction that the conversation in the parking lot had helped him understand how to make. He studied and played and kept in contact with several of the people he had met during the 6 weeks with the touring operation, and those contacts became the informal network through which the next things in his life became possible. He is in his early 30s now. He plays in a working band. He teaches guitar on the side, to children mostly, in the Lakewood area, in the after-school programs that exist for children whose circumstances resemble his own circumstances at 9 years old, which is to say, children who have found the instrument, but do not yet have access to all the things that an instrument needs to become music. He teaches with the specific patience of someone who remembers exactly what it felt like to not know how to do the thing he is teaching, and with the specific seriousness of someone who understands that what he is doing in those after-school rooms is not a side activity to his real work, but the thing that gives his real work its meaning. Patricia Webb came to his first show with his current band, a venue in Red Bank that held about 200 people, on a Thursday night in April. She sat in the front row. After the show, in the parking lot, Marcus asked her what she thought. She said the music was good. She said he had always been able to play. She said what she wanted to know was whether he was happy, and he said yes, and she nodded in the way that she nodded at the things that mattered, which was without drama, without amplification, with the specific gravity of a woman who has been paying attention for a long time and knows what a true answer sounds like. She said, "Your father never found the thing that organized his life. I think that was the problem. Not the leaving, the not having the thing." Marcus looked at her. He thought about the letter he had mailed at 17, and the envelope on the kitchen counter, and the parking lot in winter, and what the music sounded like from inside the operation. He thought about the asking being the beginning of the thing. He said, "I know." She said, "Good." They stood in the parking lot for a while, and then they went inside, because the venue was still open and there was music still playing from the next act, and the music was good. And they went in to listen to it. That is the whole story. A boy whose father left at 4, a letter written and rewritten over 2 weeks, a plain white envelope on a kitchen counter on a Saturday morning in January, a parking lot conversation at the end of a winter run, a woman who worked 2 jobs and told her son the truth, the asking being the beginning of the thing. If this story reached you today, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the asking is the beginning. And if someone saw something in you before you saw it in yourself, tell us about it in the comments. We want to know who they were.